This is a Parks Canada production. Ce balado est aussi disponible en français.
What you're hearing is the sound of the Kootenay River as it passes through the steep and rocky walls of Marble Canyon. This place is home to some very special but endangered birds, black swifts. Now, I didn't get up early enough to see the birds flying from their nests, which are tucked into cracks and crevices in the canyon walls, but I am hoping to catch a glimpse of them flying overhead. Way overhead. I brought my binoculars. Welcome back to Connected, a Parks Canada podcast. Today's episode is all about the black swift, a mysterious aerial acrobat. So settle in to learn where to find them, what it takes to study black swifts, why they're in trouble, and much more.
My name is Candace Jung, and I am a resource management officer with the wildlife management team. So my role with Black Swift, I'm responsible for all of the summer field work that occurs for this project.
Really didn't know much about black swifts or hadn't heard much about them before. Did you have that same experience?
I didn't know about them. I didn't know that there was a colony living in Marble Canyon, and it was really interesting to learn about this species that I'd never heard of really, and then get so involved in them. The opportunity came up in 2019, which was the year that the black swift was listed as endangered under the Federal Species at Risk Act. I went on a multi-day trip into the Yoho backcountry with a couple of staff members from a different park, and we surveyed all the waterfalls back there. And yeah, I've been involved with the project ever since then.
Candace, that's a great introduction to it. Can you describe a little bit more about that experience?
The Yoho Valley, it's a gorgeous area. There's really a good trail system. While we were hiking that circuit, we stopped at every waterfall and did a habitat suitability survey. And then we also went and did an early morning survey at Laughing Falls, which meant we woke up at 3 a.m. and hiked 5 kilometers in the dark to get to that spot. A dawn survey, you sit and you watch a waterfall, which is somewhat relaxing, if not for, the fact that you're watching to see this very fast-moving bird that may or may not be there and trying not to miss it.
Yeah, I think what really struck me when I went out with your team that one morning was just how fast the birds are. You blink and you've missed one flying past.
Exactly. At some sites where you know that they're occupied already, there's a little bit less uncertainty, but sometimes when you're going to a new site and you're not really sure what you're going to find, if you don't detect any birds, you kind of have this self-doubt afterwards where you're like, is it me? Did I miss the split second that they were flying from the nest?
One way to manage this kind of uncertainty and doubt in research is to establish a standard protocol, a set way of doing things that everyone follows. If I collect data using a standard protocol and someone else collects data using the same protocol, we can easily compare results. Multiply that by, say, the number of people doing black swift research in Canada, and all of a sudden you have a large data set packed full of information.
We are collaborating with our counterparts in all of the mountain parks: Jasper, Banff, Yoho, Kootenay, Waterton, Mount Revelstoke, and Glacier. So there is somebody in each of those parks who is doing similar work on black swift, and we're all working together to make sure that our methods are similar and we share knowledge and technology and tips and tricks.
Gathering more information about black swifts often starts by figuring out where to go and what to look for. Although they are the largest swift species in Canada, black swifts are not easy to spot. They spend most of their time flying at high altitudes, catching delicious insects.
I'd say the most distinct thing about them is the shape of their wings when they're in flight. It's sort of a scythe shape, and it's quite easy to pick out if you know what you're looking for.
Before you start searching the sky with your binoculars, you'll need to be in the right place at the right time, like near a waterfall in July. You see, black swifts live in very specific places and only spend some of their time in the Canadian Rockies. This creates challenges for the people trying to protect them. I asked Candace to elaborate.
Yeah, with species at risk, especially with a species that doesn't spend their entire life cycle here, we can do only so much within our borders. The two biggest threats that were identified were climate change and also airborne pollutants affecting its food source. So black swift feed exclusively on aerial insects, and without that food source, they won't be able to survive. And then also climate change, if there's reduced stream flow from glacial retreat and smaller amounts of snowpack in the year, that could really affect their nesting site. So when we think about those large scale issues, knowing that something so big could affect something as small as just a little microclimate niche for one single bird, the scale of it is very hard to come to terms with.
I think a lot of scientists have experienced that feeling, and maybe you have too. Climate change has widespread impacts, but there are still a lot of actions we can take to protect species at risk.
We've got the National Parks Act, the Species at Risk Act, and the Migratory Birds Convention Act. When they're here, they are protected. So what we're doing is we are actively going out to identify critical habitats. So that would be nest sites of black swifts within our parks. And then we are also monitoring their population and distribution status and trends.
Right. And about how long has this work been going on for?
So in Yoho and Kootenay National Parks, we've been gathering information since 2019.
Black swift research is still in its early days here. There is a lot that we don't know yet, but we're learning more every year.
The research that we do have has shown that black swifts nest in sites that follow very specific criteria. They have to be shaded and near running water, at a high relief with unobstructed flight paths, and inaccessible to predators. So here in the Rockies, that usually means that they're nesting in cliffs near waterfalls or canyons. And that's just a really specific niche to occupy, and I think it's really cool. It kind of sounds maybe like the real estate requirements for superheroes' Fortress of Solitude.
Yeah.
I picture those spy fortresses where the waterfall parts and there's a hangar with a fighter jet inside. So I think that's just really cool how mysterious they are and that they've evolved to occupy this very small section of habitat. Mm-hmm. We are super lucky in Yoho and Kootenay that there is a lot of potential suitable habitat, like Marble Canyon and the Yoho Valley, that we can access quite easily from roads and trails. But there's also a lot of habitat that's likely in areas that are very remote that we might not even know about yet.
Area closures and restrictions in the national parks protect ecologically sensitive areas, important habitats for species at risk, and locations where the potential for conflict between humans and wildlife is high. When visiting the national parks, research your route in advance, and if you come upon a closure, change your plans. Together, we can make space for wildlife where they need it most. Your actions matter. When you leave a national park, leave it wild. Learn more at parkscanada.ca/wildlife rules.
One of the things that we have been using is citizen science like eBird. We've been looking through eBird observations, and if someone reports seeing a black swift within our boundaries, we kind of follow up and try to match that to an area. We also use the World Waterfall Database, which is a real thing. So those are some ways that we can gather information before we start actually going out and testing things on the ground.
And are there any unique approaches you've taken to explore some of that difficult to access habitat? Like, I know that drones are being used a bit more with the Black Swift program. What does that look like?
Drones are quite invasive to wildlife.
Right.
But in the wintertime, when the black swifts have migrated south for the winter, it's a really good non-invasive way for us to get into less accessible features and take a closer look. For Marble Canyon, where you walk along the top of the canyon, but you can't see down in, you can't really get to the bottom of the canyon safely.
Yeah.
So having a drone operator fly inside the canyon with a camera on so that they could see in real time what the drone was seeing, it's a really good way to go and take a look at those nest features.
Normally, using a drone in a national park is illegal. It's only under special circumstances with the right permit and mitigations for safety and environmental risks that these tiny aircraft can take flight.
Candace, I know the nests are often tucked into cracks. So for someone from the public, are there any signs like patterns or things on the rock they can look for that might tell them, oh, there's a nest there, I need to give that area some space?
Yeah, I mean, if you're lucky enough to be there at dawn or dusk, you might see a bird flying to or from that nest. But something that is a really good indicator is the presence of bird feces and algae underneath that ledge or niche. So that's from the birds sitting on the nest and doing their business. And you'll see the streaking of the guano, the white streaking, and then also because there's all those nutrients, algae will grow there. If you see anything that looks like it's a nest or like it could be occupied, it's really important just to leave that.
Okay. And have you ever been able to see a baby black swift in the nest?
I actually have seen a nestling. So we were looking at this one feature and we're like, that looks like a nest. We can't really tell because the light isn't great because it's shaded inside that niche. So we pulled out this forward-looking infrared camera and looked at the same spot, and you could see the heat signature of the nestling relative to the rock around it.
Right.
We didn't want to get too close, but we could zoom in with our cameras then and make out the shape of a nestling there.
Is there one day on the job or a particularly memorable experience that you've had while studying black swifts?
Yeah. The first time that I surveyed at Marble Canyon was, I think, the most memorable time that I've ever spent surveying. Marble Canyon has the largest known number of occupied black swift nests in all of the parks. It's kind of a claim to fame.
Yeah.
The first time I surveyed at Marble Canyon, I'd been out for a few presence surveys at dawn. I hadn't really seen anything. I was starting to think that I would never see a black swift in nature. Woke up, rolled out of bed at 3 a.m., drove to the canyon, hiked into the survey site. I was still sort of half asleep, kind of cold. And then all of a sudden, like whoosh, right above your head, there's a black swift and then another. And they were all just zooming around in the canyon and over our heads. And we could even hear them vocalizing to each other, which isn't something that you can usually do unless they're in a group. And it was just so magical. It kind of was a way to connect to those birds and sort of understand they're here and they're important and this is really cool.
You can hear black swifts at Marble Canyon in Kootenai National Park. Just set your alarm for a very early wake up, bring all your warm clothes and a big thermos of your favorite hot beverage. I've done this myself just the one time, but can absolutely say that it was worth it. Here's a little teaser of what you might hear.
Plan a trip they won't forget. Sign up for a Parks Canada guided hike to Stanley Glacier this summer and hold a 500 million-year-old fossil in your hands. This family-friendly hike provides an excellent introduction to the Burgess Shale fossils. Journey through fire-swept forests with wildflowers and lodgepole pines, cross a turquoise river and gaze at the Stanley Glacier. Visit parkscanada.ca/Burgess Shale to learn more and book your next adventure.